Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
And good morning to you. It is April 3rd. Too bad it's not April 1, because it would be more fitting that this be April Fool's Day. Yow. I just, right before the show started, checked stock market. And it says here, the Dow craters 800 points. S&P heads for worst drop in years. Well, yeah. So that's Trump making America great again. I'll tell you, this greatness is going to be more than any of us can handle. Really. Jesus. So, here we are. With all this tariff stuff, I have to admit, I found out something that I didn't even know, but in this day and age, there's so much we're finding out that we never knew. Trump, of course, in doing this, is doing something that, frankly, he doesn't have the power to do. He's just willy-nilly doing anything he wants. What I didn't know is presidents have no inherent power over tariffs whatsoever. The Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the power to impose tariffs. That's who imposes tariffs, Congress. But not when you have this megalomaniac in the White House and this scoffer at the rule of law. Now, turns out there is a possible workaround, which we're finding out exists way too often in our country, because there's something called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. I'm not sure when that thing got passed, but it was obviously passed by Congress, and a Congress willing to abdicate in an emergency situation its powers over tariffs to the executive. So what does Trump do? He simply declares an emergency, which is an executive prerogative. And it occurs to me, I think he's declared do you know how many emergencies have been declared? I mean, he declared an emergency so that he could legally grab people off the streets and send them to some hellhole in El Salvador without due process. He had to essentially say we were at a state of war, I believe. And now he's had to do the same to impose these tariffs as a different emergency. You would think, and the absurd thing is that I think we Americans in general do feel that we're in an emergency. The emergency is not what Trump is saying it is. The emergency is Trump. Oh, God. The law that I just said that he's invoked now to create the emergency so that he had the power to impose all these tariffs can be overridden by an act of Congress. So Congress can say, wait a minute, we want, there's no emergency here. Congress could put a stop to this immediately. But of course, Congress, because of the genius of the American people, is wholly in the hands of the reckless autocrat in the White House. And so the Republicans have not used the power they have, although there's a little bit of an inkling that some may be willing to do so, in that a number of Republican senators, as you know, astonishingly, did pass a resolution. This was by Democrats and, what is it, 5 Republicans, was it? Collins, 4, I think. Collins, Rand Paul, Murkowski, and Mitch McConnell. For all the good that's going to do. Okay. But it at least showed that, you know, there was a little inkling of a little peep of protest. So, yeah, he didn't have the power to do what he did yesterday, which is tanked the our stock market and stock markets all over the world. Man, there is an emergency. It just ain't the one he says it is. The whole world, sirens are going off all over the world because of him. No other reason. Him and his recklessness and his destruction of every kind of system and alliance that had been put in place since before we were born. Whoa. I mean, sirens going off so much that at 5 a.m. this morning, I guess, well, in Europe, 5 a.m., which would have been last night, the head of the EU called a news conference. I mean, that's not a normal time for a news conference, 5 in the morning. She's the EU president, Ursula von der Leyen. And she called a news conference at 5 a.m., which would have coincided pretty much with when he came out with his tariff announcement. Europe was asleep, but she wasn't. And she called this 5 a.m. news conference because it was an emergency, a real emergency. And she said to Trump, if you take on one of us, talking about European countries, you take on all of us. But of course, the markets in Europe tanked. The markets in Asia tanked. The United States markets are tanking. What a genius. What an effing genius this guy is. And I was looking at some quotes from freaked out people in a position to, I guess, be called by newspapers for a quote in this situation. One, former Treasury Secretary, former president of Harvard, Lawrence Summers, and he said, the best estimate of the loss from tariff policy is now, he's talking about the loss to us, close to $30 trillion. That's what his calculations have come to, or $300,000 per family of 4. Now, I don't know what his calculations are. Man, if it's really that huge a hit, that is catastrophic. And then, guess who else we hear from? Trump's former vice president, Mike Pence. Mike Pence, yeah, was aroused enough by the tariffs to say, this amounts to the largest peacetime tax hike in American history. Well, yet, as you know, Trump has said this is all because of what they are doing to us, the huge tariffs that they put on our goods. I have to admit, when I saw the numbers that he was putting out of how high the tariffs are in Europe on American-made products, I was stunned a bit. But of course, it turns out, as so much that comes out of the Trump administration, um, those numbers are bullshit. They're not true. Now, The Economist, who I think knows a little bit more about economic stuff than Donald J. Trump, economist Paul Krugman points out that, well, he said he has no idea where the numbers for the tariffs that Trump alleged the European countries are tacking on to our goods coming in to their countries. He said, I don't know. No, he didn't say this. Another financial journalist said, I can't figure out where he got these numbers. It's like he just took our trade deficit with each country and divided it by the country's exports to us or something. I mean, this is extraordinary nonsense. And Krugman said that generally the EU places tariffs of less than 3%. On average, you average out their tariffs less than 3% on American goods. The number Trump used yesterday for his, saying this is why we got to do what we're doing, he said the Europeans were putting 39% tariff on our goods. Krugman, I assure you, a more reliable source on things economic, says it averages out generally to about 3%. So the emergency that Trump had to declare so that he could then slap these outrageous tariffs on mostly our friends. We don't really have any friends anymore, but countries that we used to think of as our friends. Uh, it's insanity. And then, I don't know if you had the stomach to watch his presentation. I did not. But at one point, he apparently held up a large, board showing all of the countries that had been targeted and what each tariff was for each country. And, obviously reporters, some, given this is their beat, looked at carefully at the small print, and they found some, as is so often the case with this administration, they found information on that board the president held up, showing what a tough guy he is. They found information that was, well, incorrect, one, incomprehensible, two, and laughable, three. Because this is the administration that can't shoot straight. This is the administration that botches everything it does. They're clowns. They're incompetence. So that on the list of all these countries we're getting back at for robbing and pillaging us, is a place called Svalbard. Have you heard of it? No, I haven't either. Sounds Scandinavian. And it turns out it is. Svalbard and Jan Mayen. It's another one. Same. Svalbard has been targeted with a tariff. And it turns out it's an archipelago. Remember that? You remember what an archipelago is? I don't either. It has something to do with I'm thinking land jutting out into water. It's a geological or geographical construct, an archipelago. Anyway, that's what Svalbard is. And it turns out there's a Russian coal mining settlement there. It's been targeted because God knows they've been up to no good, apparently. Then there's a desolate island called Jan Mayen. It's near Greenland. Ooh, it's in the Arctic Ocean. It turns out it's a little bigger than the size of the District of Columbia. It's a mere spot in the Arctic Ocean. It's not the most hospitable of spots either. And yet, there are 18 human beings stuck there. 18. And they're running an airfield and a meteorological station on Jan Mayen. Man, that'd be a posting you wouldn't want. And I'm assuming if it's near, it must be, I don't know, does it belong to Denmark? Who the hell knows? Anyway, both this archipelago and this desolate island with 18 frozen people on it have both been targeted by Trump in with our tariffs. I just want you to know that, as has Norfolk Island in the South Pacific, which was a penal colony until 1855 and is mostly just beaches, and people sometimes go there, just to enjoy the beaches. So it's a tourist place, has a population of a little over 2,000 humans, and Trump has slapped a 29% tariff on goods coming from Norfolk Island. What goods? Nobody can think. For that matter, what goods are coming from the little dot in the Arctic Ocean with the 18 freezing meteorologists manning the airstrip there? That'd be a good question, too. So when he announced these tariffs yesterday, he the fact that places like this dot in the Arctic Ocean, this little palm tree beach place near Australia or something, that have no major manufacturing, they're not. How the hell? Who put this chart together? How did the genius of this administration, the level of nitwittery, of nincompoopery is mind blowing. Turns out the archipelago in Norway has next to no humans on it as well, but it does have polar bears. And there's penguins on, I think as well. Penguins and polar bears. They've been hit by the "don't fuck with me" strong arm of Donald J. Trump. Also hit was something called the Heard Island and McDonald Islands near Australia. Not near, 2,500 miles from the mainland, but when you're talking that part of the world, I guess that counts as close. These islands, also targeted with tariffs, are unoccupied. They have zero trade with the United States, and they both got hit with 10% tariffs yesterday by the brilliant Trump. administration. Oh man, guys, you gotta laugh when that's the proper response. And I mean, there's going to be a lot of pain coming from what he did yesterday, all over the world, not just us, not just us. And there will be retaliation, of course. Um, Mind blowing, just flat out mind blowing. And the fact that there's always these little, these mistakes made, always. It's sort of like Musk and Doge. They go in just slam bang destruction. And, never an apology, never an explanation. The only thing that we onlookers with our mouths agape are left to assume is that the people in charge are idiots, destructive idiots. I keep having an image of, if you let a group of chimpanzees loose in the Oval Office, it's I just imagine them cavorting and doing this and doing that and swinging from the chandeliers and uprooting stuff. I mean that's essentially what we got. Mm, unbelievable. Okay, so another thing that Trump hit at the other day was the Smithsonian, which is a national treasure. It includes a number of different museums, a zoo, all this kind of stuff. And he has declared, I guess, it as woke and intending to clean it up. Now, what it is, of course, is a storer of American history and legacy, and often, I think most of the Smithsonian exhibits and stuff are free. You just walk in and enjoy them. Um, and again, it seemed almost laughable, like when he took over the Kennedy Center. This kind of thing seems on its face laughable, but of course it's not. And I read a piece yesterday, and I'm going to do something I don't normally do. You'll forgive me or not. I'll never know. Um, Let me get this for you. Monica Hess, who writes for the Post, her reaction. Rust Belt writes, thank goodness somebody put a tariff on those polar bears. They've been getting a free ride for far too long. I understand. Yeah, we've really been had. So Monica Hess saw that the White House had charged that the Smithsonian had been overtaken by this woke crap and what they called a corrosive ideology. And so she, like any good columnist, thought she'd remind herself of what's in there. And she went to the Smithsonian American Art Museum. It's just one of the museums. And actually, it's this one that got called out. The Art Museum got called out when the White House charged it with the Smithsonian in general with wokeness. I think a lot of the accounts were initially focusing on the historical aspect, the fact that the Smithsonian and the African American Museum dared to focus on slavery, American history, slavery, Jim Crow, civil rights, all that stuff. That's American history. But it's not, this crowd considers it, I don't know. So anyway, I want to read some of Hess to you because it touched me. And it's the difference between somebody having somebody writing her reaction, which means she has the opportunity to spend more time and be more thoughtful than somebody like me who just, blathers in real time, out of my head. And when you have the opportunity for more thoughtfulness than my medium provides me, you get something that I think can be very elegant, and it's why I sort of wanted to share it with you. A few days ago, she writes, I spent 14 minutes standing in front of a single piece of artwork, a 1998 installation called, well, I'm going to say it in English, The Twins. It's tweens, I don't know. The Twins. It is a life-size, hyper-realistic sculpture of two little girls, the twins, sharing a swing. They're dressed identically in communion dresses, and they wear boxing gloves featuring Puerto Rican flags. But one has blonde hair and light skin, and the other has dark skin and dark hair. They stare placidly ahead, while museum visitors like me are left to stare back and ponder how the world might treat these two girls with their shared DNA and their different complexions. It was uncanny, it was thought-provoking, it was beautiful and sad. I wasn't sure whether I liked it. I wasn't sure whether I was supposed to. It's art, after all. It was part of an exhibit that Donald Trump had cited by name the day before in an executive order titled Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History. The president had declared that federally run museums, such as the Smithsonian, were promoting, quote, a corrosive ideology that needed to be corrected. The order read, under this historical revision, our nation's unparalleled legacy of advancing liberty, individual rights, and human happiness is reconstructed as inherently racist, sexist, oppressive, or otherwise irredeemably flawed. She goes on, whoa, this is of course a ready-made column idea. Let's go see the corrosive art in person. But it turns out this is easier said than done. Trump had cited an alleged exhibit at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, but some Googling revealed that the offending exhibit was actually part of an online infographic that hadn't been displayed in 5 years. He dinged the forthcoming American Women's History Museum for celebrating transgender athletes, but how would he or I know what curators plan to include since the museum is still 10 years away? Ground has not even been broken. Now, here again, this again shows the sledgehammer, hand-fisted idiocy of this administration. Even when they write things down and call, in his executive order and calling out something, They don't even bother to do the most basic research. Like, is it true? Is there an exhibit? Turns out not. Is there a museum celebrating transgender? No. None of it is true. But Hess sees that there was one exhibit that seemed to be causing him particular consternation, and it was there, and I could go visit it. It was the American Art Museum, and it is currently hosting what is called The Shape of Power: Stories of Race and American Sculpture. And that includes the twins and 81 other artworks created between 1792 and 2023. So she says, oh, I went over. I spent about 4 hours there. I could have spent 40 more. I planned to write, oh, you can probably guess what I planned to write. This order's asinine. This president is terrible, blah, blah, blah. Whatever you wanted that column to say, it probably would have said. But here's the thing. The Shape of Power, the exhibit that set him off, is just one exhibit on the museum's 3rd floor. And so to get to it, you have to walk past everything else, which, if you keep stopping and looking at things, as museums intend for you to do, it's going to take you hours. And when I was done, what I wanted to share more than anything else wasn't a screed about Donald Trump, but instead what I saw at the museum. In this massive stone building in downtown Washington, a museum that is absolutely free to absolutely any person who wants to walk through the doors, that is open 364 days a year. I saw paintings by Edward Hopper and Frederick Remington, Georgia O'Keeffe and Grandma Moses. I saw landscapes of dense forests and tall mountains and deep lakes and rainbows rising over the Grand Canyon. I saw in the walls of an institution created to be America's museum. The Smithsonian's host as many as 30 million visitors a year. The meticulous realism of John Singer Sargent's society ladies reclined in their finery, and the pioneer women shading her eyes to look out over dry plains, and I saw a lonely ship sailing so small under the northern lights of Alaska. All on my way to get to the Shape of Power exhibit. I saw the most vibrant paintings of Negro League baseball players and of black school children playing after school in 1936 Brooklyn. And I saw so many paintings depicting the vast mass of the American West, back when Europeans hadn't even mapped it, back when it was an idea to them more than a place. And I saw paintings of the Brits and Germans who came to discover that American West, and paintings of the Sioux and Cherokees they displaced and harmed in order to own it. And all of those groups of people were painted with such dignity, all the heroes of their own stories, all trying so hard to figure out how to live in this country. I saw mountain lions. I saw artworks made of bottle caps and artwork made of wood carvings and artwork made out of farm equipment and an astounding, enormous altar made by a black man named James Hampton, who declared himself the director of special projects for the state of eternity, who had served in the segregated U.S. Army and then worked as a janitor, and who created this astonishing, overwhelming work that took up an entire wall as an ode to his faith when he got home from cleaning other people's messes. Art belonged to Hampton as much as it belonged to Hopper, who had trained for 6 years under masters of New York School of Art and Design. Art belonged to everyone. And on my way to the exhibit that Trump says revises history and makes the country look inaccurately racist, I saw a painting from 1946 called Frightful New York, in which a female painter, Hisako Hibi, expressed how jarring it felt to reach New York after spending 3 years forcibly incarcerated in an internment camp, along with 120,000 other innocent Japanese Americans under orders from the US president. That painting was made 79 years ago. So don't tell me that we're rewriting racism into history. It's always been there. I saw a painting called A Visit from the Old Mistress, in which 4 women who had presumably once been enslaved reluctantly greet the white woman who had once purported to own them. The way the mistress stares at them as though she expected a better welcome. The way they look at her with hatred and exhaustion and impatience and fear. The way they know they can't express any of this out loud. This painting is from 1876. Don't you dare tell me this is a new way we are telling history. Voices have been trying to tell history this way for 150 years. So when Donald Trump says our nation's unparalleled legacy of advancing liberty, individual rights, and human happiness, I ask for who? Whose happiness did we advance? Whose happiness did we overlook? Who got to have individual rights and who was coded as property in legal and official documents for centuries of our great nation's history? I saw the portrait of Woodrow Wilson, where the placard talked about how he had been a champion of curbing abusive business practices and improving conditions for workers, but also how he was regressive when it came to women's rights and civil rights. As a worker, I can thank him, and as a woman, I can hate him. And as a graduate of the liberal arts college where Wilson once taught, I can feel a historic connection to him. And as a citizen of 2025, I can be proud of my alma mater for wrestling with its connection to the man. I am able to hold all of those positions at once. I think we all can. So on my way to visit the corrosive art that I cannot imagine Trump has actually ever seen, I dropped in on a school tour where the guide plopped down a bunch of 6th graders in front of a magnificent portrait of George Washington, the most famous one. You know it, the one by Gilbert Stuart. And there she revealed that there are actually multiple versions of this portrait in existence. They're drafts. Some are just sketches, some contain just his face. They're all just rough drafts. It got closer and closer to the real thing as the artist tried his best to capture this complicated man, this founder of our country, this enslaver, this hero. And that is how history is made, rough drafts, again and again. So on my way to the corrosive art, I dropped in on another tour group, and this one containing mostly Japanese Americans. And on that tour, one tourist gently interrupted the tour guide to ask whether she would like a complete translation of some of the Japanese calligraphy that was written on one of the paintings. The tour guide, who was white, exclaimed delightedly that yes, she would. She would love the translation. And now she, the tour guide, has learned something new about the place where she worked every day and a painting she walked past every hour. And that is America. That is how we tell the story of America. Together. Each one of us contributing what we can. And when we learn something new, we think about how wonderful it is to learn it rather than burying the new information down where it can't hurt us. I made it finally to the exhibit, The Shape of Power. I spent 14 minutes with the twins and another 45 just wandering around through sculptures, massive and small, old and new, literal and inscrutable. If you're looking for something to be shocked by, you can probably find it, but no more so than anywhere else in the museum, no more so than anywhere else in our history. America is a shocking place, shockingly beautiful, shockingly violent. And the people in it will make you weep with every emotion that can prompt tears. Jubilant, sad, ridiculous, sublime. It's America, after all. You cannot love America without hating a little bit, but you cannot hate it without loving it so much. Wanting it to be better, wanting it to be what we all deserve. As I stood with the tour groups and the lunch crowd and the tired families pushing strollers and doling out juice boxes, as I stood in this completely free institution that exists for no other reason than to help America learn something about itself, that was the most shocking realization of all. The Smithsonian is not filled with hatred toward our busted, struggling, awesome country. It is filled with the deepest love. And that is what I learned at the museum. I think that is just beautiful. Just beautiful. So my thank you to Monica Hess for, yeah. And that is so much of a better reaction and pushback at Trump's ridiculous proclamation and threat to muck up these wondrous, wondrous repositories of our history and of our common experience. Anyway. Oh, excuse me. Okay, a few things I learned from the newspaper this morning. You know, it is just just so in their effort to get rid of fraud. By the way, is anybody aware of any specific instances of the massive fraud that resulted in this Doge attack on USAID, Social Security, you name it, Voice of America, all of these agencies and institutions? Has anyone seen? I'm serious, because I haven't seen them, triumphantly. I mean, if anyone would do it, it'd be Musk if he found it, triumphantly holding in his hands the evidence of this massive fraud he's ridding us of. I swear, and granted, maybe I haven't seen it. And I suspect I haven't seen it because they haven't found it. I'm not saying that you can't or I can't find many instances of federal dollars not being spent wisely, but massive fraud. The only massive fraud and thievery of tax dollars that I am seeing are the ones that the oligarchy are getting away with. The one that Trump and his family of grifters are putting in their pockets. Not some poor federal worker who's now out of work, who sat in a cubicle day after day after day as a public servant, keeping the machinery of the government that serves us little folks running. So here's the kind of good work that Trump is doing. They have now fired literally the entire staff of the low income home energy assistance program. Stop and think about that. Here's a program that has existed since 1981. I think that probably puts it in the Ronald Reagan era. Since 1981, and designed with one thing in mind, to make sure that poor Americans, often elderly, do not freeze to death in their homes in the winter for lack of the money to pay utility bills. And with global warming now, we know that poor and elderly Americans are at great risk in the summer of literally being baked alive for want of the means to afford an air conditioner. So this is a tiny $4 billion program, nothing. And they laid off the entire staff. They fired everybody. There's nobody left to do any work, anything. And there's something about the richest man in the world and his boys going into an agency like that exists to keep people alive who don't have money like he does. And they just decimate it. This is what happens when you put men with not a whit of human empathy, with not a scintilla of understanding of how human beings struggle to live. This is what happens when you give them carte blanche. It's ugly. And let's be very clear, people will die. They're killing people. And they don't give a damn. Trump every once in a while shows that he has sympathy. I don't know how that happens, but I suspect he has it when, since everything's transactional with him, he manages to conjure up something approaching sympathy for somebody when he can identify with them in some way, another grifter who got caught. So that explains, when you look at the people Trump has used his pardon power to snatch out of the claws of justice. It is a group of, I mean, just disreputable, truly dishonorable, disreputable, despicable humanity. That's what it is. And one has popped into the news today, and he wasn't like one of the guys that stormed the Capitol on January 6th and tried to kill the Capitol Police. Um, he is he's a fellow grifter, a New York grifter. And he came into Trump's orbit because he was in the orbit of the Kushners. The Jared, the son-in-law's father, who is a crook, and in fact got grabbed and convicted and served time. He is a convicted felon, Senior Kushner. And so these are the friends all these people keep, fellow crooks. And the guy I'm talking about is a man named Jonathan Braun. And he was first granted a pardon or clemency. Oh, his sentence was commuted. In Trump's final days in office in his first term. You'll recall he handed out a whole bunch of pardons, which is often the case for presidents on those final days. But his list of people who he pardoned was particularly rich. I mean that in any way you choose to take it. So Braun at the time his sentence, he was serving a 10-year sentence for running a marijuana smuggling ring. And this is a good friend of Kushner, Jared's dad, and it's Jared who brought it to the president's attention, and the president said, well, I mean, if he was some black guy, dealing some pot on the street corner, man, I'd kill him. We could just execute him on the spot, but this is a guy who's running an operation. I identify with that, so he commuted his sentence. Since then, oh, shut the fuck up. Excuse me. So this Braun, since his sentence was commuted and he got sprung from jail, has been arrested 4 times? Yeah, he has. He's been arrested 4 times. And the most recent time was, I guess, this weekend on Saturday, where he was arrested for on Long Island for punching some man in the face. The man was holding his 3-year-old child. He punched the guy in the face and then shoved the 3-year-old to the ground. The charging documents have charged Braun this time with assault, endangering the welfare of a child, and injuring a child. Okay, it's a fine man. And then the more I read about him, oh my God. Since Trump sprung him, he has been banned from operating his predatory lending business in New York State. A federal judge accused him of engaging in deceptive practices, and he's been accused of a number of crimes, punching his wife, his 78-year-old father-in-law, punching him in the head. The father-in-law was attempting to protect his daughter, the wife who he was coming after. He's been accused of grabbing a nanny's breast while touching his private parts. He has been charged with trying to assault a female nurse with the pole that was holding up his intravenous bag. And he was threatened. I, he was threatened. He was in a synagogue praying. Yeah, I bet. He was in a synagogue and he was yapping at somebody, and some guy in the pew in front of him turned around and shushed him, and he threatened to kill him. He also threatened to kill the rabbi. You can't make it up. He has been accused of violence against debtors. He also, yes, it says he, including a rabbi who he told, "I am going to make you bleed." It just that this is one of my more favorite stories of the day, of one of the people that managed to get Donald Trump feeling enough of a measure of sympathy for a fellow human being down on their luck. Never mind starving children somewhere. Never mind old people freezing to death in their unheated homes. But, a fellow grifter just trying to make his way through life, punching out little kids, congregants, rabbis, assaulting nannies, and his father-in-law. I don't know. Just a regular guy, a kind of guy that Donald Trump would love and identify with. Okay, and speaking of pardons, there was another thing I saw that is just shows the venality of this administration, and this one is about this totally incompetent prosecutor that Trump has put in a very important position. And he's in an interim position as a U.S. attorney in Washington D.C. So he's in the venue in a bailiwick in which the high and mighty are under his thumb. And this guy, Ed Martin, who you've probably read about before, but maybe it hasn't stuck in your head, is an idiot from Missouri who has never been a prosecutor. And yet Trump appoints him as U.S. Attorney, Chief Prosecutor in Washington, D.C. That is one of the most powerful and prestigious positions in federal law enforcement. And unsurprisingly, this guy totally unqualified. But he has the qualification that Donald Trump values. He loves Donald Trump. And he will do anything to curry favor with Donald Trump. And so, you know what this guy has done? The New York Times reports today that he has been, apparently, for the last 2 months, sending harassing letters to people who worked in Joe Biden's administration and to Joe Biden's family members, including his brother and sister-in-law, James and Sarah Biden. James and Sarah are two of Biden's relatives that Biden pardoned, preemptively pardoned on his way out of office. These are not people who assault rabbis or assault 3-year-old children. Their crime is they were Joe Biden's family. And Biden took to heart that Trump said he was going to go after his family. on, I'm sure, trumped up charges. So Biden had issued them these preemptory pardons. This son of a bitch, this Ed Martin, is abusing his powers as U.S. Attorney in D.C. to harass these people and to suggest that their pardons aren't legal, because he's alleging that Joe Biden was not in his right mind, did not have the mental capacity to consent to anything, let alone pardoning. They've already said he didn't even sign these pardons. It was used with an auto pen, which doesn't matter. It was all, but so this is this is an incredibly important position, and it is being used to harass two old people who've committed no crime except being members of Joe Biden's family. They've gone after others too. His former, I mean, it's this guy. So this guy is so noxious, so vile. And Trump has now said he wants him to lead the office permanently, but that requires Senate confirmation. And Tuesday, Adam Schiff, Senator now, Adam Schiff, announced that he is going to move heaven and earth to prevent the Senate from voting on Martin's nomination. Now, even if Schiff pulls it off, it really doesn't matter, because as we know from Trump's first term, he doesn't care if somebody has Senate confirmation. He just lets them serve, in interim positions without Senate confirmation. He doesn't give a shit. So, just wanted you to know that one too. Okay. Oh, and one quickie. Secretary of State Mario Rubio has revoked the visa of a man named Oscar Arias Sanchez, whose name might ring a bell. He had been the president of Costa Rica, but more importantly, he won the Nobel Peace Prize for brokering a number of Civil War ends in Central America. He now, in fact, runs a foundation that promotes peace and democracy. And that could explain why he is now persona non grata and is not allowed to travel to the United States. Rubio said last week that he had signed more than 300 letters. This guy, Arias, got one, revoking the visas of students, visitors, and others to expel them from the United States because of their criminal activities or foreign policy views. This guy's foreign policy view is peace on earth. He has the Nobel Prize to prove it. And in Donald Trump's America, he's a criminal, he's dangerous, he's persona non grata, and he can't come here. All right, that's it for me. Keep your eye on these guys. Don't let them off. Saturday, 12:30, Grant Street, hands off demonstration. Be there. We need these things to be huge. Also, demonstrations in Butler, in Beaver. Check out, there's also a later one at Mellon Park. Just go to hands off, Google it, and you'll see. Okay? Don't sit. This is no time for sitting. This is time for standing up.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.